Welcome to another episode of Before You Kill Yourself with your host, Leo Flowers. I'm glad you decided to join me today. This is a good time. It's a great time to be alive. I have psychiatrist Owen Muir on the episode today. I just realized I might be butchered. It's either Mur or Muir. I just realized I have no idea how to pronounce his name, but we're gonna trudge on anyway. He is a doctor at brooklynminds.com. Check him out, where he offers psychiatry, deep TMS treatment, and psychotherapy. And of course, we're going to talk about what TMS treatment is during the episode. So stay tuned for that. He's a psychiatrist and, more importantly, an advocate for his patients and their recovery. The goal of psychiatry and even psychopharmacology should be to enable full, rich lives. Mental illness can impair your freedom. So, in a collaborative approach, he seeks to discover what is hampering your satisfaction, ergo, your stress, side effects, work life balance, relationship, sexual problems, or symptoms of psychiatric illness. In this episode, we talk about all the things. He talks about how he has bipolar disorder. And in his third year of residency, he had to check himself into a psychiatric or a mental health facility, and the reason is fascinating. He checked himself in for suicidal ideations, and what triggered that is something that we've talked about, but briefly in past episodes. So you want to check that out, and we also talk about um, why you shouldn't sleep in on the weekend. Sleep is so huge. It's downplayed in terms of its relationship to suicidality and the research. We get into the research on the meds that are prescribed for suicidality, and are they effective? What say ye about lithium, ketamine, and clozapine? Oh yeah, we get into it. And then what I love is we talk about how humans are so bad at causation. We think we know what led to what, but we're horrible. We're horrible at figuring out uh, what what led to B. Was it A? We always think it's A, but sometimes it's not A. Sometimes C led to B. Um, and then the importance of putting a question mark at the end of your sentences instead of an exclamation point. We talk about all that and so much more. This is one of those episodes where I was taking a copious amount of notes. I just like using the word copious. And of course, we talk about how to feel understood and why that's so important. Um, if you haven't, go to thrivewithleo.com for one-on-one coaching with yours truly. Let's get to tomorrow together. And with that said, let's jump into the episode. Yeah, man, it's an exciting time to be in this field, this mental health field, and I know that you're the are you the CEO and founder of Brooklyn Minds or
No, thank God. My wife, Carlene McMillan, is the CEO and co-founder of Brooklyn Minds. I am the chief innovation officer.
ooh, I like that title, Chief Innovation Officer. What does that mean?
So, well, we were trying to figure out the actual title for what you do, and when you run a startup, um, all those titles are kind of like meh. And then you learn how important those roles actually are when you start dealing with serious actual business people. Um, I originally had the title of Chief Service Officer, which is above Chief Medical Officer, which we didn't have. But basically, I don't do that stuff. What I do is I come up with new ways of treating conditions, new ways of training people to treat mental health problems, and new ways of paying for that care. And as the person in charge of coming up with new ways to do stuff, innovation officers is the name for that.
So what? All right. So I love this idea of coming up with new ways to treat mental health. And because I know that you are one of the techniques that you employ is TMS.
That
Um,
is correct.
and can you talk to us about what TMS is and how that's used?
Sure. I'll also just mention, because probably want to get to it later. I am a CEO of our sister company, Sphere, Spheyer, which is a consulting firm. And the job of Sphere you'll hear about later, but it's basically like, how do I solve all those problems with payment and getting people to actually get care, et cetera? We had to create another thing that let us kind of do that interfacing. And so I co-run that with Michelle Burnaby, who's one of my team members, and Dave Belinsky, who is a wonderful person in the benefits space, who kind of like TMS is awesome, and you're going to hear that in just a second, but it doesn't work without a way to get it to people. And it's kind of like any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And so transcranial magnetic stimulation is a way of directly changing how neurons in the brain fire without using any medicine whatsoever. It is using magnetic fields to induce an electrical field in the circuits in your brain, and those wires we call axons. And it's just using basic physics principles to change how our brain fires, which sounds pretty far out there. And it turns out it's a really unbelievably powerful technology for helping people get better, and created the kind of moral imperative to do what we're doing.
And now, this transcranial, the TMS, in terms of its use for people who are struggling with suicidality, how do you use that?
So until recently, it wasn't something we used in people who are suicidal generally. In fact, almost no treatments in all of psychiatry have any evidence for use in people who are suicidal, which doesn't mean we don't use them all the time. It just means we've done no actual research or study to determine if they'll work. Because every single antidepressant drug everyone ever takes, excluded from the studies on those medications, are suicidal people.
Wait, so
Fucking crazy, right?
so
Yeah,
you're
no,
telling me that all this research that I've been reading about lithium and how effective it's been, there's even research showing that in countries where they don't have lithium in their water, that there's an increase in suicidality. That there's been no studies to show the efficacy of any of these drugs on people who are struggling with suicide. What is
So that's
the
not
logic for that?
entirely true. It's an insidious logic that makes sense when you understand it, but it doesn't make you any happier. All the data on lithium, it's important to understand, is from studies on bipolar disorder. But none of those studies was designed to study suicide. So everything that we know about lithium and its effects on suicide is inferred from research on bipolar disorder. When you pool enough of those studies, you find the remarkable finding that in people given lithium for bipolar disorder, and for people who have a tiny bit in the groundwater, there emerges from the data a trend towards reduced completed suicide. That does not mean lithium is a treatment for suicidal people. It means it's a good drug in bipolar disorder, and that means less people complete suicide who have bipolar disorder who take lithium if you look at enough of them. But telling causation from that isn't something we can do, because none of those data sets were designed to determine causation around suicidality. There's one medication that has ever been studied for this, and it is clozapine, an antipsychotic medication, where in a study called the Intercept trial, they compared it to olanzapine in people with schizophrenia and schizoaffective disorder and determined there were less suicide attempts and less suicidal behavior on clozapine than on olanzapine. That and ECT were the only things we had for a very long time. Every antidepressant medication trial that's ever been run has had as an exclusion criteria people who are actively suicidal at baseline. Ketamine does have data for suicidal people, and that's a new finding and a new treatment. They're actually going for an FDA approval for acute suicidality for esketamine. But yeah, Prozac, Zoloft, Paxil, 0 studies let you in if you're suicidal. Now, why? Well, it turns out it's a huge pain in the ass when someone kills themselves in your FDA trial, because then the FDA is like, did this drug kill them? And you're like, no, of course not. They were suicidal when they walked in. Well, why did you let us? It's still a reportable event. And basically because of administrative hassle and like ethically, you don't want people dying in your study. Now, of course, we recognize in other health conditions this is bonkers, right? And we have sick people in cancer trials because it's fucking cancer and that can kill you. It's dangerous. But in mental health conditions, we exclude the sickest patients in terms of suicidality from our studies by and large of medications because we don't want the hassle of having them actually complete suicide in the study. And then we'd have to report that on the label of the drug saying, this drug makes you kill yourself, according to the FDA. Beware. So
That
that's why we don't do it.
that completely makes sense, Owen. And
Yeah, it sucks, right?
it completely sucks. I'm sure are there countries that do allow for that kind of thing to go down?
No, this isn't country by country. This is there are ethics around research, and there are institutional review boards, quite rightly, to protect vulnerable people. And psychiatric patients are the most vulnerable populations from unethical researchers who want to do things like see if people will die in their study. Now, again, in other fields of human endeavor, we take serious things seriously. And for reasons that are complicated, in mental illness, we don't.
So, and what I love about you is even though you're a psychiatrist, and I say even, see, even I said even though, because I feel like the imagery of psychiatry is somebody walks in your office and you just dose them up with drugs. But what I'm fascinated and what made me reach out to you is the fact that you take a very collaborative approach to someone's mental health treatment, and it's not just take some pills twice a day and I'll see you in a month. Uh,
Yeah.
for people who come into you with suicidality, what is that collaborative approach or
So,
comprehensive?
so I mean, you figured it out pretty well. Suicide is something that's really important to me, and it's for a bunch of reasons. My grandfather died by suicide. My dad had to cut him down when he was 5 years old. So this is part of my family inheritance. Suicide runs in families. We know this. And I went to medical school to become a child psychiatrist because I wanted to help people not kill themselves, essentially. And I did residency training, and they teach you how to prescribe medicine. And I was lucky enough at my program, they taught me at Zucker Hillside Hospital, where I trained for adult residency, and NYU Bellevue, where I trained for child psychiatry. We really had some very, very sick people. And I learned that medicine only goes so far. And so I needed to look for other answers for these problems. And one of them turned out to be, like, while we were busy ignoring suicidality in medication trials, psychotherapy has research with very, very sick, very suicidal people, mostly with personality disorders, for treatments that are effective at reducing suicide attempts and, we believe, completed suicide. And so I was like, wait a minute, hold on. I went to fucking medical school to learn how to prescribe all these drugs, and they don't fucking work or have any evidence for what I'm doing. I hope swearing's okay. And
Passion is always okay.
so, I mean, I was aghast, essentially, and I was a huge failure as a doctor, and I saw my patients not doing well in therapy, and I felt like it was bullshit. And meanwhile, I have bipolar disorder. And in my third year of residency, I was admitted to the hospital because I was suicidal. And that was a real experience. And when I got out, I started thinking quite a bit differently about hospitalization and about how it helps or doesn't help with suicidal people. And the data is pretty strong. Your risk of completed suicide is highest after you're discharged from the hospital. And it's not that much lower actually in the hospital. And we're talking 200 times higher than baseline. So I think we're killing people by hospitalizing them. We don't know when, because it happens after they leave the hospital.
Now, when we talk about mental health, one of the things we're always emphasizing is a routine. And is part of that increase due to a change in routine, a transition? We know that transitions in our lives, for good or bad,
Yep.
is where we can drop the ball on things. For
Yeah.
less
I
of
so
a
so th- this is where, like, I can't tell you why it happens.
okay.
I'd be lying if I could. I can tell you we know that it does happen, And we have some natural experiments to prove things one way or the other. So, like deinstitutionalization, when Kennedy closed the state hospitals or kicked most people out, there's no change in suicide rate. So we went from like, on where do you live?
Well, I live in Los Angeles, but I'm currently in
Okay.
San Diego.
Okay. On the East Coast in New York, we have a couple of state hospitals near me. One of them is on Long Island, and it's called Pilgrim State. And that had 60,000 people living there at its peak. We emptied that place. There are like 300, 400 people left at Pilgrim. And the suicide rate didn't change. So what were we doing? Maybe some good. Like, it's better than being in jail, which is where we put people now. We call that trans-institutionalization. Instead of being in one institution, you're in another, which is probably less compassionate. But I don't think hospitalization for some things, like acute suicidality, if we have meaningfully modifiable risk factors, well, then we can attempt to modify them with hospitalization. But we shouldn't kid ourselves in thinking there's no risk in doing that, because there is very serious risk. And practically from my own experience, I can tell you when I walked out of the hospital, all that imagined safety I had around me was gone in an instant. And I had to figure out how to keep myself safe. And that was terrifying when you're sick, especially. Most of us get to walk around and, you could kill yourself any second. Jump in front of a car. You could jump in front of the subway. But you don't think about it like that. You think like, I'm going to work and I'm crossing the street and I'm going to wait and not get hit by that bus because that's what you do. You don't have to think about how easy it would be to take that extra step and die. And for people who are dealing with suicidal thoughts, they think that whether they want to or not, basically. And you go from an environment of like imagined complete safety, can't possibly do anything, and people kill themselves in hospitals all the time. But you walk out into the world again, and there's no one keeping you safe but you. And I think that's pretty terrifying. And we also discharge people after there is literally no plausible way biologically we have done anything to modify their underlying condition. Antidepressant medications take at minimum 2 to 3 weeks to work. We discharge people after 7 days.
And is that more of an insurance thing that we are discharging people after 7 days?
Yeah. But I actually agree with them because like hospitals kill people. So why keep them there? Now, there are people who are trying to change how this works, because right now psychiatric hospitalization has less resources and less tools available to help doctors help patients than outpatient care. And my colleague Nolan Williams at Stanford took this very seriously. And so he published a paper on transcranial magnetic stimulation given in a new way at a higher dose in a quicker period of time that works for acute suicidality. And that's a game changer.
So for people who want to access that, then I would assume that the barrier to that type of treatment would be financial for most people.
Well, so it's twofold. One, there's only one place other than Nolan's lab that does it, and that's my office. There are a few places in the country that probably know how to do it and maybe do some version of it. But the thing he does involves neuronavigation, and that involves a scanner. And we use a different technology to administer the TMS called the H-coil by the BrainSway company. It's actually a patent owned by the U.S. government and licensed to BrainSway, which is an Israeli company, and close partners with us. We work with them on research and treatment. They're really a remarkable science. But you can't, like, giving someone TMS 10 times a day, 5 days in a row is really logistically a huge pain in the neck. And you need a lot of staffing, scheduling, administration, financial workarounds, blah, 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 to be able to pull it off. And most psychiatrists practice alone in one office with a chair and a couch and not a whole staff of administrators dealing with insurance. It's just hard to do, and so people don't do it. So financial is one barrier, which I'm working to solve, and the other is how complex it is to deliver this care.
All right, so if we can go back just a little bit to you've been hospital. Now, what led you to the hospitalization? You said it was your third year. Was it the stress? Was it the staying
You
up
know,
late?
I I don't think the staying up late helped. Actually, overnight shifts, 24-hour shifts is what we did. But I have bipolar disorder, and it was a change of seasons. It was spring. That's the summer in my case. That was the problem. I'd love to pretend it was something fancier, but it wasn't. Um, and there's an underlying biology, and kind of can't ignore that. And as I mentioned, antidepressants don't have evidence for suicide. In bipolar disorder, we have very few medications for bipolar depression, and they don't work very well. So, the medication I was on wasn't that helpful, it turns out. And, my brain went to the place that people with bipolar disorders brains go when things are going wrong, and that's depression and in some cases thinking of suicide.
I'm so fascinated because I was reading about how, we used to think that it was wintertime when there would be an increase, but really it's from summer to fall, that change of seasons, as you said, that extra amount of daylight um, that
Yep.
that people experience, and it throws off our circadian rhythm, and then it makes us
Yep.
feel like we should be doing more because there's more
Yep.
sunlight, and it's like, when can I get off this goddamn Ferris wheel, this hamster wheel, right? And that causes agitation and frustration and stress, and it becomes this domino effect, and then it throws off our sleep. Was that like your experience? And if can you explain that from like a, a, a biological point of view of what's really happening and why the change of seasons affects a lot of
Yeah.
people?
There are some illnesses that are more circadian than others, and I think classic bipolar disorder is a circadian rhythm dysfunction with a mood component, not the other way around. When I was discharged from the hospital, my psychiatrist was, of course, on vacation at the time. Uh,
Owen, I'm sorry.
People don't
I
get.
want to just for the listeners, can you
Yeah,
explain what a circadian rhythm is for people
yeah.
who may not know? And
Thank you.
then,
I
please,
appreciate it.
thank you.
Science terminology. Circadian rhythm just means rhythms of day and night. How much light there is in the day, how much light there is at night, how long of a day it is. And when the sun travels around the Earth, or the other way around, the Earth travels around the sun, and there's a tilting of the Earth in that process, the amount of daylight in the day changes. And it's actually like a function of Euclidean geometry. Good old Euclid from Greek times, plotted this out. There's an elliptical orbit. And that means that some days are longer and some days are shorter, and the Earth is spinning around, gives us day and night, and that changes for us in a predictable pattern. And if you remember Isaac Newton, he during the last major pandemic, one of the major pandemics, the Black Plague, he had to go live in the country with his mom because he had to get out of London because London was bad during the bubonic plague, and he was super bored, and so he invented calculus. And calculus was invented basically to make sense of physics because he had questions he wanted to answer. And one of those questions is like, how fast is something changing? And so the calculus equation that describes how much the rate of change of daylight is reaches its maximal value in the second and third week of October. And then there's another peak in the spring, right before the changeover to spring around daylight savings time. And those are the two highest risk times of the year for people with bipolar disorder and other seasonal mood disorders for getting depressed, more or less. Different things happen to your mood in the summer when the days are long and there's more daylight. But it turns out there's a part of the brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. It basically is like before you can't see it. And there are neurons in your eye. There are rods and cones. And there's one more photoreceptor, which we didn't learn about until the 90s. And that just responds to like light of day, blue wavelength light. And it only projects to the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is the clock. And so how much day there is turns out to be a crucial bit of information for your brain. And changes in that information profoundly impact our mood and sleep, which can, again, change how much light you get in the day. And it turns out a treatment for acute mania and bipolar disorder is wearing glasses that block blue wavelength light. That's it. 70% remission of acute mania by wearing sunglasses.
Whoa! What? You telling me sunglasses?
Very specific sunglasses for lasers, but yes.
And so, can you repeat the name of the sunglasses again?
Well, I could, but it won't help because it's really long, and you can get them on Amazon for $8, and I can share that link with you.
I appreciate it.
But they did a study on these, and they call it acute, rather virtual darkness treatment. So they took people in an inpatient unit, and they gave them either placebo glasses that didn't block this wavelength, 460 nanometers, or they gave them glasses to wear 14 hours a day, most of the day, that did. And when people wore these when they were manic, what they found was they were not manic much longer because they were living in, as far as their brain was concerned, darkness. And that made the mania go away.
And so, is this something that you would recommend for people to wear during those periods of the year, or?
So I give these out to patients all the time. I say, when you get home and it's dusk, put these on. Because your brain, we should be in sync with light and dark and night and day because that's how we evolved. And our brains are looking for that. And computer screens have a lot of blue light pumped out. So do TVs and iPads and phones and stuff. And if you wear these glasses at night, then your brain thinks it's dark even if you're futzing around on your laptop. And so I have a pair of them. I give them to my patients. I just order them by the case. Because it's a great way to help you fall asleep if you've already been, as far as your brain is concerned, in darkness for 4 hours before bed.
Man, I think you just saved my life right there with that, because I have
It's good
been
shit.
trying to figure out this whole. There's so much light, and I'm like, God, it's 8 o'clock, and there's still
Yep.
light out. Like, am I supposed to be writing a novel or something? Like, what the Jesus? Should I take a CrossFit class? What am I? God, I just I want to watch. Like, I love movies, and I read somewhere that there's a season for everything, and that winter is a great time for movies, and summer is a great time, I think, for music or reading. I forget which one it is. And spring is a good time for music or whatever. And I was like, why is that? And then I realized, yeah, winter in the movies in the winter, because it gets darker sooner, and that's when you want to watch movies, when it's dark. And I'm like, I can't enjoy even watching TV because it's so bright out. It's not. It doesn't have the same ambiance or effect.
Yep. It's that. It's kind of bonkers that it's it's not that simple, but it's kind of that simple. That day and night are powerful, and that we are creatures of this earth. We were born here, we evolved here, and we are still subject to light and dark and the sun to regulate our sleep and wake and mood.
So, having bipolar disorder, and not like this is something that is just something that you have to be aware of. We all should be aware of our sleep. Are there other strategies or tactics that you have for people? So, because sleep is such a big, what I find is that I can sleep okay. I fight sleep at night though. Like and it may be because of the sunlight, where there's an agitation that sets in. I'm fine during the day, but at night I'm kind of like, and I don't know, like there's this small window between the evening and bedtime where I kind of feel agitated, and I'm like, I should go to bed, but I'm like, no, I don't want to go. It's like I'm a 9-year-old.
Yeah.
And do you is there an understanding of that, or?
There is, and it would take a little while, but the short version is sleep's important and you should do it regularly. That go to bed at the same time every night. It's a learned behavior. Wake up at the same time every morning. Don't sleep in.
Not even on a weekend.
And you'll be better. Not even on a weekend. There's a therapy for bipolar disorder called IPSRT, interpersonal social rhythms therapy. And it basically takes interpersonal therapy and adds this understanding of day and night and has you track it. And it's remarkable because for people with bipolar disorder, you can look at their patterns of sleep and wake and their patterns of mood and see how they like line up, but not in ways that are super obvious before you've tracked it. So I had a 16-year-old girl I worked with at Bellevue, and we looked at her patterns of her mood and when she was sleeping. And it turned out when she had like a 3-day weekend, she would sleep in till like 10. And then like clockwork, 3 days later, she'd get depressed for a week or more. And so every time she had one of those long weekends, she'd come in a couple days later and be like, I don't know why I feel so bad. And then we looked at her tracking and we're like, well, look, this happens every time. She's like, wait, so it's me sleeping in on the weekend? That means a couple days later, I feel like dying? Yeah, actually. And so she fixed that, and we didn't need to adjust any medications. She just didn't have that problem all the time anymore.
Oh my God! The 3 days later, that it's
3 days
just
later,
like it's
yeah.
just like working out. So like I'll work
Yep.
out, like on do a hard workout Monday, and it won't be till Wednesday or Thursday where I'm like, oh yeah, I feel every bit of that now.
Yep. Humans are really bad at causation. And so like figuring out that was the thing. Like I can tell someone like you should sleep regularly and they'd be like, yeah, I know, but like fun. I want to go have it. And okay. It's not until people really see the hopefully the repeated consequences of something that they can put the pieces together in a way that help them understand so they can change their behavior.
Yeah. So it sounds to me like nobody should have children.
Oh,
Like if we're talking
don't say
about
that.
sleep, if we're talking about staying on a sleep schedule, like if there's anything that disrupts your sleep, it's having a baby.
Yes, I have twin children, and that's true.
So what's your workaround for that?
Well, I mean, we got a night nurse because we had to.
Okay,
For me, basically, we were lucky enough to be able to do it. But
all right, for the impoverished people out there with children,
yeah,
who can't afford it.
Well, I mean, I was. I mean, I'm not impoverished by that too. I was a resident. It was just like I was gonna, for us, my wife and I are both doctors, and like we had enough discretionary income just to make that choice, and we were very lucky to be able to do it. What I do think it means is that for everybody who's thinking of having a kid, like that's a good time to assume stuff's going to go wrong with your mental health, and so maybe getting some mental health care at that time might make a lot of sense. And dads, you're important. At night, you may want to get up so mom can sleep through the night. But early childhood's a time-limited experience. And good sleep training, our kids were sleep trained in like 9 weeks.
Wait, you mean at 9 weeks old?
Yep.
So, okay, I there's two things I want to unpack. One is, this is the importance of, I know listeners are like, night nanny, come on, man. Grandparents.
Yeah, it's not forever. It's for 9 weeks.
Right. But I understand. But what I'm saying is this is the importance of having grandparents. Having family around, people who can, that extended family, that support. I mean, I feel like we live in a society where it's all about, as soon as you're old enough, like you have to move away and go prove yourself to the world or to the family. And it's the exact opposite of what really works for us. We're very tribal and stay connected. We know that suicides go up with people who live overseas, or especially if they don't have any family or friends and trying to reestablish roots. It's about that social connection. So that idea of having your parents, grandmama and grandpapa, either moving in with you or living close to them, that was something I always looked down upon when I was younger. But now I'm realizing the value of that, especially like you said, when you're having kids. But now the sleep training, was that something that you trained the babies on, or did you, the night nurse?
That's why the night nurse. The night nurse
Wow.
is an expert behaviorist, Janelle, and Janelle is amazing and just understands behaviorism and how people learn like nobody else. And so she got our kids trained to learn how to sleep from 9 weeks. She didn't wait till they're 6 months and then spring it on them. So it's an expense, but it's not for that long. And I have bipolar disorder, and I didn't get sick during that period of time at all. I haven't had since TMS came into my life. as a treatment that I got before I was giving it to other people. It hasn't really been a problem, which is really nice.
Now,
And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
yeah, no, so like sleep super important from the beginning of your life on.
It sounds like I know a lot of adults that need a night nurse. Is there anything that
Yes,
you right? Is there
yes,
something you
I couldn't agree with you more. God, if someone would tuck me in at night and make sure I turn the lights off, and oh yeah, that'd be great.
are there things that you learned from the night nurse that you've applied to yourself or taught other?
Totally,
Please
totally.
share all of it. Don't hold back on any of that.
Well, so luckily it's not a secret. There's the approach to this is called cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia in adults. But like this is some basic stuff. Don't go to bed till you're tired. When you're tired, go to bed. If you're laying in bed worrying about sleeping, get out of bed because associating bed and sleep with uh, with anxiety means bed is a place where you won't sleep for adults. For kids, you go to bed at the same time every night. You wake up at the same time every day. The other reason we got a night nurse and not just a family member is because we had twins. And if they're out of sync, oh God, you're dead. Um, so we had to have someone who she's actually like a twin person. That's all she does is twins getting to bed at the same time. I had a colleague who she should work with later, who is a sleep medicine child psychiatrist, and she had to be schooled on this. So basically, they're going to bed at the same time every night. They're being fed at the same time when they wake up, and they get up at the same time, and they take naps at the same time. When one goes to sleep, so does the other. When you have twins, and by keeping that a super regular thing, the bedtime routine is sacrosanct. You do not f with it. They have their milk, they have their bath, they have their jammies, and they're in their bed, and then you leave them alone. And this means when they start crying at night, you have to ignore them. And this is hard for parents. Because what happens when you have kids who are crying and you're like, just wait a little bit longer, honey. Well, you wait 10 minutes and they learn to cry for 11. You wait 20, they learn to cry for 22. They will break you if you're breakable. And so you have to, when you're sleep training kids, tolerate for a couple nights the distress of listening to your children cry and not helping them. Because they'll eventually be like, okay, this crying thing is not working. Let's just give it up and go to bed. And it's really about adults not being able to tolerate their kids' distress that makes kids get, comforted at night. And that means they stay up because they love being comforted. This is awesome. I can spend more time with my parents. Babies are great behaviorists of their parents. They play us like a fiddle.
I love that you said it's about the parents not being able to take their kids' distress. Um, I was reading somewhere that when we think about humans throughout history, we all slept together,
Yep.
whether it was in a teepee or a cave or by the fire. So there weren't bedrooms. There wasn't put the kid in one room and we go to sleep in another. And so it makes sense that a lot of parents are struggling with um, how to train their babies to sleep at night, and also it also explains why we do want to rush in when the kid when the baby cries. It just makes sense. It's something that um, I think that as we progress, quote unquote, and become more innovative, that these uh, inclinations or tendencies in us, they're not refreshed for the public, right?
Yeah.
When we went from sleeping in a teepee or caves or whatever and together, and then we went into 3 and 4 and 10 bedroom apartments, and no one discussed all right, here's what's gonna happen, here's what you're gonna want to do, and here's what you should do. Like that, these
Yeah.
conversations aren't had enough, and I think that we would be more compassionate towards ourselves and towards the people in our lives.
That's the key. Compassion towards yourself and towards others for things they can't change. All the stuff I'm talking about is just recognizing basic biology of how people work and respecting it. Things go well. and trying to ignore it, things go badly.
Now, because we're talking about circadian rhythm and sleep, I really want to stay on this for a little bit longer. The I was told that if you don't want to read or watch anything that's too stimulating, because then that gets your fight and flight mode up to speed. What else is part of your sleep routine, or what do you work with your clients on?
Well, I got lucky because when I was a little kid, I got introduced to books on tape. And books on tape and podcasts have been the most important part of my sleep routine since I was a baby. And I just kept it up. So shows like yours, which is awesome, by the way, very soothing. Roman Mars, 99% Invisible. There's a show called Revolutions, which is super boring play-by-play of revolutions. Like, and it was the Battle of Ticonderoga in the U.S. Revolution, and George Washington then moved south, blah, 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 blah. And it's just enough information to keep my little restless mind engaged, but not enough to keep it interested. And so I can fall asleep. I don't have to like worry about just my mind just kind of looping on other stuff. And so reading or doing anything at all in bed other than sleeping, and sex when you're having it, because that's a place for that. Sleep and sex are the only two things you should do in bed. So if you're going to read, don't do it in your bed. Preferably don't do it in your bedroom. But if you have a one-bedroom apartment, like sit in a chair with a really dim light and do it there. When you get in bed, that's for sleeping. If you're not tired, get out.
Man, I have like 20 books next to my
Yeah.
bedstand.
Yeah.
It does. When I think about it, it weighs heavily on me.
It's sabotage.
Yeah, it's weighing heavily on me.
It's not that reading at night and doing things quietly isn't an awesome idea. It is. It's just where you do it matters by like 2 feet. Because we're all Pavlov's dog, right? You ring the bell, we salivate. You get in bed. If you've trained yourself to sleep in bed, you will sleep when you get in bed. If you've trained yourself to stay awake and be anxious in bed, you get in bed and you will be anxious and not sleep. We are learning machines, and we're doing it whether we want to or not, is the thing. Like attention, yeah. That's how kids train their parents.
What's your alarm clock? What are you waking up to? You got the sunlight?
Yeah. I don't have shades in my windows.
Really?
Yep.
You know what? When I stay in Vegas, the first time I went to Vegas, I was doing a week of shows there, 7 days, 2 shows a night, and I was so depressed. I was suicidal. I called the 1-800 suicide hotline. I couldn't take
that's
it.
It, right?
It was, man, you don't even I didn't even understand until I called him. I was like, what a blessing this is, to be able to talk to someone that where I felt heard, seen, understood, all the things. Yep. It was one of the best conversations. I almost just every now and again, I'm like, I just want to call them because they listen so well.
I mean, and that's a really like, it's important, like as a thing, because like that thing that saved your life, that's the mechanism for which we have the best evidence of saving people's lives, is feeling understood.
How do we teach people? I mean, what is that? Can you say
that's
more?
That's my whole jam. Yeah.
As to what that means, feeling understood.
Yeah. Yeah. So like it started when you're a baby, right? And so when your mom is like putting you down and you're crying at night, you're looking at your parent, your mom or your dad or your caregiver, your grandparent, whoever it is. And there's a mirroring that happens between kids and parents. And so when a kid cries, the response on the parent's face is to go, oh, sad face. What's wrong? And that response, like you're sad and I'm coming back at you with sad face, but it's not, what is wrong? Why can't you stop crying? Right. That's not different from what's going on for the kid. And so that's called marked. So it's different. It's identified for the child, like flagged as different. I see that you're sad and I'm sad back, but in a way that says, I understand your mind. And that's before we can even talk. Marked contingent mirroring. So our response is sad to sad. and flagged as different from you. So if you have non-contingent responses, it's like the kid's crying, you're like, hey, you're doing great. Right? That doesn't make any sense. And just like, when you're an adult and you feel really like invalidated when someone's like, well, your performance at work has been excellent. You're like, I just screwed that up. Why are you lying to me? God. That non-contingentness is a real problem for people. And we're learning really early on, about 30% of the time, adults have to get that right for kids. That's it. Good enough. Doing like an excellent job of interpreting your child's emotional states is actually bad. You want to get it right about 30% of the time, not too much more, not less. And for people who have that attachment that forms, that's secure, that regulates whether, as an adult, you feel understood easily or not. And so we're always trying to work out in our minds whether what we can hear from people is trustworthy. And frankly, it's not adaptive to trust people. People are awful. On average, like you're running an algorithm in your mind, like, is this information I should trust from basically everyone you're talking to, which is why you can't be like, hey dude, can you give me $20? I need it. And like if a friend we trust asks us for $20, we give it to him if we have it. That's not like a huge like decision, like, is this guy trying to rip me off? But some rando is like, dude, I need to get fare for the bus and it's $20. Can you help me out? Like, yeah, no, sorry, go away. Because we have this really elaborate system to determine who to trust and who not to trust. And when that gets wonky and we feel misunderstood and we're mistrustful of the information that's coming in, it can make you want to die. And that's what suicidality is a lot of time. It's feeling misunderstood. And when you called someone on that line and they just listened to you and checked in where if they were getting it and tried to understand how you could be suicidal, and I mean, they didn't probably give you any solutions. Like, here's your not suicidal sauce. Like, they don't have that. But the act of feeling misunderstood helps you feel coherent. Helps your world make sense. And then you don't have to die anymore. So, that's how. You were in Vegas doing shows. I interrupted you by talking about your coherent sense of self.
I mean, this is what this is about. I mean, this podcast is not about me. It's about you, the listeners, the people tuning in, the messages I receive who say, I was on the verge and I listened to an episode and I want to stay now and I feel heard and I feel understood. So
therapy works.
It works
when you feel understood, and it doesn't work when you don't. And you're allowed to say, I don't feel my therapist understands me. I'm going to get a different one. Because therapy working shouldn't be subtle.
Me and my girlfriend, we have a couples therapist, and she's so good. And I love that you said it shouldn't be subtle, because every session we look at each other like, holy shit, like that was incredible.
Yeah.
Like that was powerful. And now granted, we just started working with her, but I've worked with other therapists and I was like, all right. But it's so, every session has just been powerfully effective. So I understand it resonates with me when you say it's not subtle, because it's not a subtle feeling. It's an empowering feeling. Like, oh, if she's in our corner, we're good. Like we can take more chances, because we can.
It's so
important.
What I mean? And so like tying together that the biological piece, like transcranial magnetic stimulation changes your mind about killing yourself within the course of maybe a day, sometimes a few more. But in 80% of people, it works in a week, 5 days. And what works means in this context is you can better interpret information from your world and trust things that should be trustworthy, basically. And one of those things that we powerfully know is that we shouldn't kill ourselves. That's bad information that our brain is feeding us. And you can even think suicidal thoughts and not want to kill yourself. Like, people do that all the time. Like everybody who goes in the subway is like, yeah, I could jump in there. And then they let it go because it's not a big deal. They're not tortured by it. It's just a thing people think. So, and the difference is we don't learn to trust how absurd it is that we would end our lives at times when our brain isn't working right and we feel so misunderstood.
So basically, when someone's saying I don't trust you, or this, it's like I just don't feel understood by you. Is what they're really saying. Is like I feel like
Mhm.
you don't get me at my core.
Well, think about it. Like we grew up in tribes, like you said, we all lived together in our tribe, and there are other tribes. Now, when you bump into somebody else and you talk to them, that's some dangerous shit, right? What are these people going to do to me? I got to work out if this is going to be cool or not. And by the way, this is how racism happens. Um, we see someone different, and we just like we don't know if we can trust them. And systemic racism just plays on that and builds whole structures of power around that misunderstanding that's built into meeting someone new or someone who doesn't look like us, doesn't come from where we come from. But that system saved our lives for a long time. Not trusting people is how humans evolved and stayed safe. Don't go with the bad man in the free candy van. Yes, mom. You learn that really quick. And like you learn when you feel understood, that's when you can trust. And when you can trust, you can learn. So you could be a psychology major. You might have been. I don't know. I was. You take 4 years of classes about therapy, and it's not therapeutic. The difference is with your couples therapist, you feel like she understands you, or he. I don't know. And that understanding lets you learn simple shit like maybe check and see if you're getting it right. Oh, amazing. It's really basic. My whole job as a psychiatrist would be one visit if people would just automatically trust me, which I know they don't on average. Think about it. What are things therapists have told you that have been important for you?
Say that last part again. What are some things
What are
people?
things they've said to you that have been important? What saved your life?
One of the important things that have been said to me is that the idea of journaling with my non-dominant hand, so that it taps into my 9-year-old self. So, and I've been doing this more recently. I go back and forth between doing this and other forms of journaling, but I will journal for 3 minutes with my dominant hand and then switch to my non-dominant hand for 3 minutes. And I'll do that twice. Sometimes it's five, sometimes it's 10, but usually three, just to
Mm-hmm.
get both sides of the brain going.
Yep.
And it was something that one of my therapists recommended to me when I was like going on the road for a couple of weeks and I wasn't going to be able to see her. And I was like, you're going to have to give me a homework assignment. I need something to anchor myself down. And that's something that she gave me that has always stuck with me. Um, and then the other thing was learning how to listen so that and how to understand my girlfriend, not my girlfriend now, but my previous girlfriend, in terms of, I was doing what society was doing. Like me and my girl get in an argument and I'd be like, you're crazy. And then I would just leave. I was the avoider.
Mm-hmm.
She was the chaser. And then she
Mm-hmm.
taught me how to actually listen in terms
Mm-hmm.
of one person should be the investigator and one
Yep.
person should be the one who's speaking, and not to mix those two. Is to be very clear as to who is
So what you're
asking the
describing
questions. Yep.
is awesome. That's emotionally focused therapy, or EFT,
Yes.
uh, developed by Sue. What's her last name? God. It's based on attachment. The thing I was talking about with your kid, that mark contingent mirroring stuff.
Yes.
Sue took that data set and turned it into a therapy for couples. So what you were learning and the language she put around it, that's learning how to build trust. And so the amazing thing is when your therapist told you something, you could do it, right? You actually did the homework. You listened to what someone said for once because you trusted them.
You're right. Yeah, it's all about. It really is. It comes down to trust, and then
Because like,
and then
don't be so hard on
application.
yourself.
Yeah, and then application. Right, and
Yeah.
you know what I love that you said earlier. You were talking about the books. Like you said something about how oh my God, what'd you say? Where you do it matters by 2 feet,
Yeah.
and that idea of where you do it matters by 2 feet, and like that's how close you are to being right on target. And and I think a lot of people don't realize in their life, whatever their challenges are, their struggles are, for the most part, you're like 2 feet away from being right on target, whether it's, asking more questions or listening more, or, listening to soothing podcasts or taking the books out of your room. Like these small adjustments can have such a huge impact, whether it's sleeping without the blinds on your window or putting on those glasses, right? The sunglasses,
Yep.
it's like these small little changes, and so that's why I encourage people who are listening to hold on to hope, because you're 2 feet away. You're so close to to managing 80% of whatever is challenging you right now.
Yeah. And it's really, it's just, I mean, it's, what the hell is wrong with you is just a question mark different from what's wrong with you. What, help me understand? Question mark. So if you can replace the exclamation points in your life with question marks, done. Therapy.
I love it. Uh,
Suicide is being sure that you should not be alive. Living is not being so sure that you should die.
can you repeat that one more time? That's so powerful.
Yeah.
Please.
Uh, Suicide is being sure that you should die. It's, I need to die, exclamation point. If you put a question mark at the end of that, that's life. Hope is just going, well, I don't know how this is going to turn out. Let's see. I'm curious to see what comes next.
Owen Muir, I don't know if there's anything left to be said. Is there anything that we haven't
Uh,
discussed in terms of helping people? I know there's so much more we can go
yeah.
into, but
I mean, I do it again. I'll give you kind of like the short wrap up of your initial question. How do you take care of people who are suicidal comprehensively? Well, you have therapy. You have people who are good at it. You train to do it relentlessly. You talk to each other all the time. So you hold your own mind in line. Like the way I keep suicidal people out of the hospital is I don't lose my shit. And the way I do that is by talking to my colleagues who are like, dude, calm down. They're probably going to be okay. And so then I don't call the ambulance and they don't go to the hospital just because I'm scared as a psychiatrist. And then they don't have that incurred extra risk. We help each other. We're a tribe. And therapists need their own tribe to help you, I would argue. And then you take the things that work really well and you use all of them. So transcranial magnetic stimulation turns out to work really well. And so even though it's a pain in the ass, we use it. And medications work only so well for some things, but you should know which ones you're using them for. And so we do. And believing in people and teaching the people, like your therapist has to believe in you. If they do not believe in you, it will not work. If you have to feel your therapist understands you, and so maybe you need more than one therapist around. If one of the things I've learned recently is like, I'm a great therapist. I'm really good. Oh my God, I'm a white dude. So some people are just never going to open up to me. And as great as I could be, it doesn't matter, because if you can't take that first step into a therapist's office because they don't look a way you can trust, and there's no flag there that says maybe you can trust this person. I mean, I have some patients. I have patients of all ethnicities, and there's something about our connection, our relationship, that lets them trust me no matter what we look like. But for some people, it's really important that we have more therapists of color. Really, really, really important. In most jobs, diversity is like pretty good. Like we need it. It's good. It's good for the work culture, blah, blah, blah. But in my field, we need to recognize that any edge we can get in building trust is crucial. So being culturally competent is mandatory, and having therapists of color there for people who can't get past that without a little, familiarity will do that, right? If you're queer, you want a therapist who you think can understand that. And sometimes that means you're not going to talk to a straight therapist, which doesn't mean we might not be the best ally ever, but you have to build some trust first. So you really need diverse teams. So whatever someone's going to connect with, there's someone there that they can figure it out with. And I think group therapy is really important too, because we learn from each other, not just from like therapists, but from other people's journeys. And I think it's more powerful and frankly more scalable than individual therapy. So I'd say, like, how do we do it? by recognizing hospitals don't solve everything, by constantly learning, and by having some humility around what people are going to trust and what they won't, and realizing that like if someone's not working out with their doctor or therapist, you get them a different one because they deserve the choice and they deserve the ability to find a relationship, because that's what it is, with someone they can trust.
Thank you so much, Owen. Please tell people where they can find you.
www.brooklynminds.com is the website of our practice. We are working on licensure in many states right now, mostly New York. Some of us have licenses in other states as well. I have a book that just came out. It's like super expensive. It's an academic book, but you can rent it for $18 on Kindle. So that's cool. That's called Adolescent Suicide and Self-Injury, Mentalizing Theory and Treatment. And although it's a book for therapists, we tried to make it pretty accessible. And so that exists. I got a podcast, Remotely Possible, Uncertainty, Anxiety, and Existential Despair. That's the name of the show. And people can listen to that and hear me talk about, mentalizing and being curious about minds and stuff. And and now I'm on your show, so that's good.
And then last question, I ask this of all my guests, because I always imagine there's one person listening in who may be on the precipice of ending their life. Before you kill yourself, what would you say to them, Owen?
Maybe someone could understand.
I love that. Thank you so much for taking this time to be on a podcast. Thank you so much, listeners, for tuning in. Remember, this podcast is not a substitute for you going to get help, for you calling 1-800-SUICIDE or 273-TALK. There's 10 other numbers and emails and chat lines listed in the show notes and in all of the show notes, whether it's for the Trevor Project, LGBTQ, there are international links and numbers also. There is someone out there who can and will understand your story and make you feel heard. You can go to thrivewithleo.com for one-on-one coaching with yours truly. Let's get to tomorrow together. Thanks so much, Owen.
Love it. Thank you so much for having me.